Back in the early 2000s, here in the UK, we saw the biggest reform, the biggest relaxation of gambling laws in the UK that I believe we'd ever seen. The Labour government pretty much opened the floodgates to new casinos, to fob-t gambling in bookmakers, and to online gambling. At that time, online gambling was still sort of a very much a fledgling thing. People didn't have such immediate and anywhere, anytime access to the internet, and smartphones were certainly in their infancy. This latest new gambling white paper that's been released by the government and proposes to change the rules and regulations around gambling in the UK is being deemed new regulation for the digital age, basically to bring common sense regulation in line with the now 24/7 anywhere anytime availability of gambling, and therefore protecting those who are most at risk and most vulnerable to generating and forming gambling addiction. Firstly, hope you're keeping safe, hope you're keeping sane. My name's Phil, if you're new around here. If you're not, thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you very much for your continued support. If you like it, find it useful, find it interesting, then like, subscribe, and do all that great YouTube stuff once you've finished watching. That's brilliant. Thanks very much for all your support. Actually, very quickly on the end of that, thank you to whoever it was who left a super thanks thing. It's the button underneath this video. I couldn't find your comment, but I noticed someone left a donation on that, so thank you very much if that was you. My apologies, I haven't been able to message you personally. I can't find it for some reason. I don't know what's happened to it. I don't know if YouTube's hidden it or what, but there you go. Thank you very much if that was you. Now, the gambling white paper is quite a long document which goes through a whole load of stuff that we already know about gambling and the potential harms of gambling. I've taken time to sift through this so I can give you a few bullet points, give you my opinion on them, and maybe give you a few ideas as to what I think might work better. Obviously, if you've got any ideas and opinions about either this white paper or about gambling regulation in general, I'd love to hear them. Stick them in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to read as many as I can, even if I don't get the opportunity to come back to you. It is the length of this white paper that is basically delayed the release of this video. It's been out for a fair few days now. It's taken me a little time to actually work my way through it, and like I say, I'll just cover the highlights in this video. As I say, the document itself and the proposed regulations are by and large based around digital gambling, online gambling, and it's because of its increased accessibility and availability over the last sort of 15 years or so since the last set of regulations were brought in. The first and the headline proposal that you would probably read in the news is the proposed limit on online slot stakes, and they're proposing a limit of between £2 and £15. Now, my opinion on that immediately is, firstly, that doesn't mean anything. That's a hell of a scope for for maximum stakes. Did I say minimum? I meant maximum. Maximum stakes. Also, that's still allowing a huge amount of scope for people to do financial damage. Anyone who's played online slots knows that you don't need to be betting at a particularly high stake in terms of what is available in order to do quite a lot of damage quite quickly. So I believe that this is a route they are willing to take. Firstly, if they are going to use this as a method of preventing gambling harm, the maximum stake will certainly have to be very much towards the lower end of that range. £15 maximum stake, I believe, does no good at all. But also, I will question its effectiveness at actually preventing any harm anyway, given that again, a huge amount of financial damage and by proxy damage to people's lives can be done. It's still on a very short space of time at a very low stake level. There is talk about restricting gambling access to under 18s. Now, here in the UK, we were until very recently one of the few countries that actually allowed under 18s to gamble in any form. Gambling is still accessible to under 18s in certain formats, but it has been very much restricted. Scratch cards are still available to under 18s, and I believe that's going to be reformed. I think the football pools, I don't know if anyone still does that, but they're going to change the age limit of that to 18. And the low stake, low prize fruit machines, so the £5 jackpot fruit machines that we often see in seaside arcades, at the moment, that is not a legal compulsory regulation for 18 plus, and they're going to proposing to make it so. However, that has been a voluntary, or I think it might be a back to initiated sort of regulation that's been in place for a couple of years or so, where it's generally not allowed for young people to play on low jackpot, low stake fruit machines. Now, my opinion on that, well, yeah, I think all of that goes without saying. I don't believe that under 18 should gamble in any capacity. I think making the fruit machine thing a law rather than just a sort of voluntary code, I think is also a good step in the right direction. My concerns, and I don't want to be a negative on this because I believe this white paper is probably coming from the right place, but I'll be saying more about that in a moment. My concern is that all that will happen in these seaside arcades, as we've seen over the last few years, is traditional fruit machines will be replaced by, I believe, the far more predatory ticket type machines, which ultimately, instead of offering a 10p play, £5 jackpot, fruit machine, give an almost unlimited stake, unlimited prize offering, where not only are the stakes and prizes potentially larger, the losses and RTPs are substantially worse. As anyone who's seen these ticket machines and ticket redemption booths and stuff will know, the amount of tickets you have to save up or win to redeem any kind of worthwhile prize is somewhat preposterous. But also it is a form of gambling that is thinly disguised as entertainment or as sort of a lottery prize kind of a thing, where the gambling element, I believe, is more predatory, possibly potentially more dangerous and expensive, but also is very much hidden from view. So I think something should be done about those. But again, I believe this white paper is coming from the right place, and the problem is, as I will go on to discuss, I believe it's probably too little too late. It's very much been sort of dithered over for far too long. Obviously, lobbying from the gambling industry, which is a multi-billion pound industry here in the UK, will have taken its toll, and we'll probably find that some of these well-intentioned measures will be watered down before any of this actually becomes law. And as we know, anything that's proposed in this country takes forever to become law. The laws around gambling advertising aren't going to change. There was already pending the ban on football shirt advertising for betting companies. Again, I don't believe if we're going to treat gambling advertising as a core problem, that this is going far enough. Again, though, I think that gambling advertising has sort of become a bit of a moot point. It's very, very hard to get the toothpaste back in the tube on that one, and because I'm going to throw another cliche out there, it's a bit like closing the stable door after the horse has bolted. People know that gambling's out there. It's become very apparent. Yes, I believe that gambling advertising certainly should be limited. The long-term benefits, and I believe the benefits would only be long-term for the banning of gambling advertising, is that it may in time become less socially acceptable and less the social norm, particularly when it comes to sports betting and betting in play and all that sort of thing. So again, they're not making any major regulatory changes around there. They're going to persevere with the banning of football shirt advertising, but that doesn't mean that the gambling companies can't advertise, the billboards at the ground during the advert breaks and all the rest of it. Although, again, there is a lot of restriction around that. Whistle-to-whistle gambling advertising has to be, accommodated by a company, by a very strong, play safe when the fun stops kind of message, which I've spoken about in a previous video, and I think is fundamentally flawed at its core anyway. But that's pretty much the bullet points of it, to be honest with you. And that, considering this is being billed as sort of a major shake-up, or the biggest major shake-up in 15 years or whatever, it doesn't feel like there's any major changes being made, or at least proposed. Those who are very vague. Like I say, setting a maximum stake is maybe a good idea, but to say it's got to be between £2 and £15 is sort of a bit wishy-washy, bit non-committal, and any stake on that scale can still be incredibly dangerous. One thing I did forget to mention is they are talking about having greater affordability checks around online gambling, so using either credit reference agencies or open banking to check whether the person playing can afford to lose the money they're losing, and they've proposed certain levels at which this can be checked. Again, these are not finalised, and they come on a scale from something like £150 to £2,000, which again, the effectiveness or the efficacy of such a policy will be in the pudding, and really depends on whereabouts on the scale that is likely to fall, which of course is going to be subject to lobbying from the gambling companies. So I don't expect to see any major improvements there. I know, again, voluntarily, A lot of the companies have already started implementing some changes. Flutter, for example, who own Paddy Power and Sky Bet and a few others, they've already put a maximum £10 stake on their sites. They already do some element of affordability checking. I guess it's probably can't imagine it's out of the goodness of their own hearts, but I can imagine it's probably in preparation for these new rules coming in. So again, like I said, the efficacy will depend, and I think it will largely depend on cooperation. And I don't trust gambling companies to be totally cooperative, so I'd say possibly mandatory cooperation, as set out in law, for information on players and spend limits and responsible gambling to be shared between the industry as a whole. But once again, what will happen is if we see online casinos that are regulated and registered here in the UK regulated out of existence, which could well happen if a lot of these laws go to the more stringent end. A lot of them move abroad, or we'll just see a greater rise in things such as crypto casinos, which don't have the standard UK regulation and are, well, I always think crypto casinos are gambling on 3 levels, because you're gambling on the value of your crypto, you're gambling at the casino, and then you're taking the biggest gamble of all, which is actually whether or not you'll ever see that money again, because these aren't regulated by the UKGC. And like when we ban anything, or indeed we criminalise anything, we push the provision of such goods and services into the hands of less reputable, less moral and less reliable people and organisations. For example, you only need to look at the drugs trade that people have been campaigning for the decriminalisation, and I've gone off topic a bit here, decriminalisation of Class B, Class C drugs or whatever. And by making them a criminal enterprise, then they are pushed into the hands of people who are less regulated or completely unregulated, less moral and obviously criminal. So that was a bit of a side point, but I think in summary, and I won't waffle on anymore because I've waffled on for ages. In summary, I don't think the bill is ill-intentioned, but I think it's very vague. I think once the gambling lobby get their hands on it, it's going to be watered down even further. By the time it's implemented, even more damage will be done. A lot of the measures will be watered out of any kind of efficacy. And even if we do take very, very stringent line on gambling regulation, particularly the online casinos, I think all that's going to happen is we're just going to push it into things like crypto or people using VPNs to play abroad and such and such. So we shall see. I don't want to be completely negative. Like I say, I think it might be coming from a good place, but I don't think it's really going to make too much difference at this point. However, the recognition of gambling as an increasing problem here in the UK is certainly a good thing. Hopefully it get a lot more people talking about gambling, which would be great. And it will maybe raise awareness, not an expression I like, but it will raise awareness to sort of parents and indeed to younger people that this is a real problem, and that maybe prevention or at least being much more aware at the front end can cause problems later down the line. I hope that's interesting. I'll try and put a link to the white paper in the description, so give it a read yourself. Let me know what you think, and I'll catch you on the next video. Take it easy, guys.